The wind howled across the desolate prairie as Felicity Turner stood alone at the Dodge City train station, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the fading light of dusk. The Kansas spring of 1878 had been particularly harsh, but nothing compared to the bitter cold of abandonment that gripped her heart as she watched the last passengers disembark, without seeing the face she so desperately sought. Felicity clutched her worn leather satchel tighter against her chest, as if it might shield her from the crushing disappointment. Her father's telegram had promised that her cousin would meet her, that she wouldn't be alone when she arrived in this frontier town so far from her Boston home. Yet here she stood, utterly alone as the station slowly emptied and the conductor called the final boarding for the train's continuation westward. Last call for the westbound. All aboard. The conductor's voice carried over the platform as the remaining travelers hurried to their destinations. Felicity's shoulders shook with silent sobs. 22 years of proper upbringing had taught her to maintain composure in public, but the weight of her situation, orphaned, nearly penniless, and now abandoned in a strange town, proved too much to bear. Her carefully pinned auburn hair had begun to come loose, matching the unraveling of her plans and hopes. "Madam, are you all right?" The deep voice startled her. Felicity turned to find a tall man regarding her with concern, his features partially shadowed by the brim of his worn cowboy hat. His weathered face suggested a man in his late 20s, with eyes that seemed to hold the vastness of the prairie in their blue depths. I'm fine," she lied, hastily wiping away tears with her gloved hand. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine." His voice was gentle, lacking the rough edges she might have expected from a frontier man. He kept a respectful distance, his hands resting casually at his belt where a holstered revolver hung with practiced ease. Felicity straightened her posture, attempting dignity. "My cousin was supposed to meet me. I've traveled from Boston and I have nowhere to go tonight." The man removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair the color of wheat. "Miss, Dodge City ain't the safest place for a lady alone after dark. Is there someone I could fetch for you?" "There's no one," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as the reality of her situation crashed over her anew. The train whistle sounded its departure, a mournful cry that matched the ache in her heart. With each passing moment, the station grew darker and more deserted. The cowboy observed her with quiet assessment before speaking again. "I'm Kieran Nicholson. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside town." "Felicity Turner," she replied automatically, years of proper introductions guiding her even now. "Miss Turner, I can see you're in quite a predicament." He glanced toward the town's main street, where lanterns were beginning to glow in saloon windows. "There's a respectable boarding house run by Mrs. Holloway. She's a good Christian woman. I could escort you there for the night, and tomorrow we can sort out your situation in proper daylight." Felicity hesitated, weighing her limited options. Her father had warned her about the dangers awaiting young women in frontier towns, but she detected nothing but genuine concern in the cowboy's manner. She was crying because no one came for her, a woman's voice observed from behind them. Felicity turned to see an older woman approaching, her gray hair neatly tucked beneath a plain bonnet, her dress simple but well-maintained. "Mrs. Holloway," Kieran nodded respectfully. "I was just about to bring this young lady to your establishment." "I can see that," the woman replied, studying Felicity with kind but shrewd eyes. "You look like you've traveled a fair distance, child." "From Boston," Felicity confirmed, grateful for the woman's appearance. "My cousin was to meet me, but—" Mrs. Holloway clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Who might your cousin be? I know most folks around these parts. Thomas Wilkins. He wrote that he has a store here." The boarding house owner and Kieran exchanged glances that made Felicity's heart sink further. "Miss Turner," Kieran said gently, "Tom Wilkins passed away 3 weeks ago. Influenza took him and his wife both." The news struck Felicity like a physical blow. Her last living relative gone, the final thread connecting her to any sense of family or future, severed before she'd even arrived. "I'm here now," Kieran said softly, stepping closer as her tears flowed freely. "That's what matters. We'll figure something out." Mrs. Holloway nodded, reaching to take Felicity's satchel. "Come along, dear. You'll stay with me tonight and we'll sort everything out in the morning. No use making decisions when you're exhausted." Felicity allowed herself to be guided away from the station, with Kieran falling into step beside them, carrying her trunk with ease. As they walked through the dusty streets of Dodge City, she found herself studying her unexpected protector. His clothes were worn but clean, his movements suggesting the quiet strength of a man accustomed to hard work. Despite her grief and exhaustion, she couldn't help noticing the respectful way he addressed Mrs. Holloway, or the protective distance he maintained as they walked. "Mr. Nicholson has one of the finest cattle operations in the county," Mrs. Holloway informed her as they walked. "His father started it, God rest his soul." "It's nothing fancy," Kieran demurred, "just trying to make an honest living." The boarding house appeared ahead, a 2-story building with cheerful yellow light glowing from its windows. It stood in stark contrast to the raucous saloons they'd passed, offering a promise of safe harbor. "You know if my cousin left anything behind?" Felicity asked suddenly, hope flaring briefly. "Perhaps a letter for me, or—" "The sheriff took charge of their affairs," Kieran replied. "I can inquire for you tomorrow." "That would be kind of you," she whispered. They reached the boarding house steps and Kieran set down her trunk. "I'll come by in the morning, Miss Turner. Get some rest." "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes fully for the first time. "I don't know what I would have done." "No need to think on that," he assured her. "This is frontier country. We look after strangers in need." He replaced his hat and nodded respectfully to Mrs. Holloway. "Madam." As Mrs. Holloway led her inside, Felicity glanced back to see Kieran Nicholson watching until she was safely indoors, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkening Kansas sky. In a day filled with disappointment and loss, his unexpected kindness felt like the first ray of hope she'd encountered in the harsh new world of the West. The boarding house was modest but meticulously clean, with simple furnishings and the lingering scent of supper in the air. Mrs. Holloway showed Felicity to a small room on the second floor, its narrow bed covered with a patchwork quilt. "It's not what you're used to in Boston, I'd imagine," the older woman said, "but it's clean and safe." "It's perfect," Felicity assured her, sinking gratefully onto the edge of the bed. "I can't thank you enough." Mrs. Holloway studied her thoughtfully. "Mr. Nicholson is right. Dodge isn't always kind to newcomers, especially young women on their own. But there are good people here too. Now you must be famished. Let me bring you up some stew and bread." When Mrs. Holloway returned with a tray, Felicity had removed her traveling jacket and unpinned her hair, allowing the auburn waves to fall around her shoulders. She ate ravenously, suddenly aware of how long it had been since her last proper meal. "Mrs. Holloway," she asked between bites, "what do you know of Mr. Nicholson? Is he trustworthy?" The older woman smiled. "Kieran's one of the finest men in Ford County. His father built that ranch from nothing, and when he passed 3 years back, Kieran took over and made it even more successful. He's respected hereabouts." She paused. "Not one to frequent the saloons or gambling halls like some. Keeps to himself mostly, but always ready to lend a hand when needed." This information provided Felicity with a measure of comfort as she finished her meal. After Mrs. Holloway departed, She washed quickly from the basin provided and changed into her nightgown. Exhaustion claimed her almost immediately upon lying down, but before sleep took her completely, her thoughts drifted to the cowboy's words. "I'm here now. That's what matters." In the unfamiliar darkness of the Kansas night, those words became an anchor to which she clung. As she drifted into restless dreams, morning arrived with golden light streaming through the simple muslin curtains. For a disorienting moment, Felicity forgot where she was, reaching instinctively for the familiar surroundings of her Boston bedroom. Reality crashed back as her fingers touched the rough-hewn wood of the bedside table. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Holloway's cheerful, "Breakfast in 15 minutes, Miss Turner." Felicity dressed quickly in one of her two remaining dresses, a blue cotton that had seen better days but remained presentable. She pinned her hair in a simple style, lacking the energy for anything more elaborate, and made her way downstairs. The boarding house dining room held a large table where several other lodgers were already seated. Mrs. Holloway made quick introductions: a schoolteacher, a clerk from the general store, and an elderly couple passing through on their way to visit relatives in Colorado. "Mr. Nicholson stopped by already," Mrs. Holloway informed her as she poured coffee. "Said he'd return at 9 to take you to the sheriff's office about your cousin's affairs." "He's been most kind," Felicity murmured, ignoring the curious glances from the other boarders. The schoolteacher, Miss Porter, leaned forward. "Are you planning to stay in Dodge City, Miss Turner?" The question gave Felicity pause. She had arrived with such certainty, with plans to help her cousin in his store while establishing herself in this new place. Now, everything had changed. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "My circumstances have altered considerably." "There's need for a seamstress in town," offered Mrs. Holloway, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before Felicity. "I've noticed you're stitching on your cuffs. Very fine work." Felicity glanced down at her sleeves, where she had indeed meticulously repaired the worn fabric during the journey. "I do have some skill with a needle," she acknowledged. Further conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. Mrs. Holloway returned moments later with Kieran Nicholson following. He had exchanged yesterday's dusty clothes for a clean shirt and vest, though he still wore the practical attire of a working rancher. His hat was in his hands, revealing that he'd made an effort to tame his blonde hair. "Good morning, Miss Turner." He greeted her with a slight bow. "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected, thank you," she replied, rising from the table. "Mrs. Holloway says you're willing to accompany me to the sheriff's office, if you're ready," he confirmed. "Sheriff Wilson is expecting us." Felicity excused herself from the table and retrieved her shawl from her room. When she returned, Kieran was waiting by the door, exchanging pleasantries with Mrs. Holloway. The morning air carried the scent of dust and horses as they stepped onto Front Street, the main thoroughfare of Dodge City. In daylight, Felicity could better appreciate the frontier town, a chaotic blend of hastily constructed wooden buildings alongside more substantial brick structures. Men on horseback navigated between freight wagons and pedestrians, while shopkeepers swept their boardwalks and set out wares. "It's different from Boston," she observed, stepping carefully around a muddy patch in the unpaved street. Kieran offered his arm to steady her. "I expect it would be. Dodge is still finding its feet as a proper town, though it's come a long way from the early days." "Have you lived here long?" "All my life," he replied. "My father came out here after the war, started with just a few head of cattle and built the Circle N Ranch. I was born in a sod house before we had a proper home." Felicity tried to imagine it growing up with the vast prairie as your backyard, rather than the crowded streets of Boston. It must have been an adventure. Some days, he acknowledged with a small smile. Others, it was just hard work and harder weather. But it's a good life, if you've got the constitution for it. They reached a solid brick building with sheriff's office painted on a wooden sign. Kieran held the door for her, and they entered to find a bearded man in his 40s seated behind a desk, examining papers. "Morning, Kieran," the sheriff greeted, rising. "This must be Tom's cousin." "Felicity Turner," she introduced herself, extending her hand. Sheriff Wilson shook it firmly. "Sorry about your loss, Miss Turner. Tom was a good man. He spoke of you often in his letters, said you were coming to help with the store." "Yes," Felicity confirmed. "I had no idea he'd passed until I arrived yesterday." The sheriff nodded sympathetically. "Terrible business, that influenza. Took 6 others in town, too." He moved to a cabinet and extracted a folder. "I've got Tom's papers here. No proper will, but his last letter to you makes his intentions clear enough." He handed Felicity an unopened envelope addressed in her cousin's familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the pages. "Dear Cousin Felicity," she read aloud, her voice wavering. "By the time you receive this, you'll likely be preparing for your journey west. Martha and I are so looking forward to your arrival. The store has been doing well, and we've set aside the room above it for your use." She broke off, tears threatening again. After composing herself, she continued reading silently, learning that Thomas had indeed intended for her to eventually inherit the store, as she was his only living relative. "The store's been closed since they took ill," Sheriff Wilson explained when she finished reading. "Everything's still there, though the perishables were distributed to neighbors." "What about their house?" Kieran asked. "They lived above the store," the sheriff replied. "Simple quarters, but comfortable enough." Felicity felt a small spark of hope ignite. "So the store is mine now?" "According to the law, yes. Tom's debts were minimal and they've been settled from the store's cash box. The property deed is here." He passed her another document. "You'll need to file it properly with the county clerk, but that's a formality." She stared at the paper in her hands, suddenly a property owner, a business owner in this strange frontier town. It was overwhelming. "I don't know the first thing about running a general store," she admitted. "Tom kept good records," the sheriff assured her. "And folks around here are loyal customers. They've been asking when it might reopen." Kieran had remained quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke. "Miss Turner, if you'd like to see the store, I'd be happy to accompany you." The sheriff nodded approval. "Good idea. I'll have Deputy Collins come along with the keys." Minutes later, they were walking down Front Street toward a modest 2-story building with Wilkins General Merchandise painted across its facade. The deputy unlocked the door and they stepped into a space that smelled of coffee, leather, and dust. Shelves lined the walls, still stocked with goods, fabric bolts, tools, preserved foods, household items. A counter with a cash register dominated one side of the room, while the other held barrels of flour, sugar, and coffee beans. Felicity moved through the space slowly, running her fingers along the counter's smooth wood, trying to imagine her cousin working here, planning for her arrival. A small framed photograph on the wall showed Thomas and his wife Martha on their wedding day, their expressions serious but content. "It's a good business," Kieran observed, watching her. "Well stocked, well positioned in town. Do you shop here?" she asked. "When I come to town, which isn't as often as it should be, the ranch keeps me busy." He hesitated. "Miss Turner, what are you thinking?" Felicity turned to face him, resolution forming. "I think my cousin wanted me to have this place for a reason. I may not know much about frontier mercantile, but I'm a quick study." The deputy, who had been examining the storeroom, rejoined them. "There's living quarters upstairs, simple but clean. Would you like to see?" Felicity nodded. and they climbed the narrow stairs to find a small apartment consisting of a kitchen area, a modest parlor, and 2 bedrooms. The furnishings were plain but serviceable, and personal touches: a quilt on the bed, books on a small shelf, a china teacup on the table spoke of the lives that had been lived here. "It's perfect," she whispered, more to herself than to her companions. When they returned downstairs, the deputy handed her the keys. "Store's yours, Miss Turner. Sheriff says to stop by the office tomorrow to file the deed proper." After he departed, Felicity and Kieran stood alone in the quiet store. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "You really mean to stay and run this place?" Kieran asked, his expression unreadable. "I have nowhere else to go," she replied honestly. "And it seems right. Like this is where I'm meant to be, even if the circumstances aren't what I expected." He nodded slowly. "It won't be easy. Dodge City's still rough around the edges. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Nicholson." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I believe that, Miss Turner." He glanced around the store once more. "You'll need help getting this place reopened. The dust alone will take days to clean." "I can manage," she insisted, though the thought of tackling the entire store alone was daunting. "I'm sure you can," he acknowledged, "but there's no need to do it all yourself. I've got 2 ranch hands who could use some extra work. Would you permit me to send them to help, just for the heavy lifting and repairs?" Felicity hesitated, wary of accepting too much charity. "I couldn't possibly." "It's not charity," he interrupted, seeming to read her thoughts. "You'd pay them fair wages, same as anyone, and it would be good for the town to see this place open again." She considered his offer. The practicality was undeniable, and the sooner she could open the store, the sooner she could support herself properly. "Very well," she agreed, "but only if they're paid fairly for their work. I wouldn't have it any other way." He placed his hat back on his head. "I need to return to the ranch today, but I'll send Miguel and Ezra tomorrow morning. They're good men, hard-working." "Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. You've been extraordinarily kind to a stranger." "Not a stranger," he corrected. "A neighbor now." He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the latch. "Miss Turner, would you permit me to call on you, socially, once you're settled?" The unexpected question brought warmth to Felicity's cheeks. Yes, I think I would like that." He touched the brim of his hat. "Until tomorrow, then." After he departed, Felicity stood alone in the center of her store, and felt, for the first time since her parents' deaths, that perhaps the future held promise after all. The next several days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Kieran sent Miguel Vega and Ezra Washington the following morning. The men, one Mexican, one a formerly enslaved man from Tennessee, proved to be diligent workers and respectful of Felicity's authority. With their help, the store was cleaned from top to bottom, minor repairs completed, and shelves reorganized. Felicity spent evenings poring over her cousin's ledgers, learning the business's operations. Thomas had been meticulous in his record-keeping, which proved invaluable as she cataloged inventory and identified items that needed restocking. She drafted a letter to his suppliers in Kansas City, introducing herself as the new proprietress and requesting their continued business relationship. On the 5th day, Mrs. Holloway arrived with several women from the town's Small Ladies' Aid Society. They brought food, linens, and practical advice for a young woman living alone. "You'll want proper curtains," declared Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife, eyeing the bare windows of the upstairs apartment. "Can't have the menfolk looking in while you're about your business. And you'll need a proper chaperone until you're established," added Mrs. Grant, a minister's widow. "People talk, especially about a young, unmarried shopkeeper. I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own," Felicity asserted, though she accepted the gift of curtains gratefully. Mrs. Holloway patted her hand. "Of course you are, dear, but appearances matter out here same as in Boston. I'll send my niece Betsy to stay with you for a few weeks. She's a sensible girl and could use the work." Recognizing the wisdom in this arrangement, Felicity agreed. Betsy Holloway, a cheerful 16-year-old, moved in that very afternoon, bringing energy and local knowledge that proved immediately useful. "Everyone's curious about when you'll reopen," Betsy informed her as they arranged merchandise. "Mrs. Wilson needs fabric for her baby's christening gown, and Mr. Phelps has been waiting for nails to finish his chicken coop. We'll be ready by Monday," Felicity decided. "Can you help me make a sign to put in the window?" Word spread quickly, and by Monday morning a small crowd had gathered outside Wilkins' General Merchandise. As Felicity unlocked the door at precisely 8 o'clock, she felt a mixture of trepidation and pride. She was dressed in her best remaining dress, her hair neatly arranged, determined to present herself as a confident businesswoman despite her inner doubts. The day proved busier than anticipated. Customers came not only to shop, but to offer condolences for Thomas and welcome Felicity to the community. By closing time, the cash register held a respectable sum, and Felicity's feet ached from standing. "You did wonderfully," Betsy assured her as they counted the day's receipts. "Everyone was impressed by how you knew the inventory already." "Thomas kept everything so organized," Felicity replied. "I'm just following his system." "Well, it works," Betsy said, peeking out the window. "Oh, Mr. Nicholson is coming." Felicity's heart quickened as she glanced toward the door. Kieran had not returned to town since their conversation in the store, though he had sent a note with Miguel and Ezra inquiring after her progress. She smoothed her skirts nervously as the bell above the door announced his arrival. "Good evening, Miss Turner, Miss Holloway," he greeted them, removing his hat. He looked tired, with a day's growth of beard shadowing his jaw, but his blue eyes were warm as they met Felicity's. "Mr. Nicholson," she replied, suddenly aware of Betsy's curious gaze. "How nice to see you again. I heard the store reopened today. Thought I'd come see how it went." He glanced around the shop approvingly. "Looks like you've been busy." "It was a successful first day," she confirmed. "Thanks in large part to your men's assistance with the preparations. I hope my note of gratitude reached you." "It did, thank you." He shifted his weight, seeming almost nervous. "Actually, I've come with an invitation. The county's holding its spring social this Saturday. Dancing, food, that sort of thing. I wondered if you might allow me to escort you." Betsy made a small sound of excitement, which she quickly disguised as a cough when Felicity glanced her way. "That's very kind," Felicity said, warmth creeping into her cheeks. "I would be delighted to attend with you." Relief crossed his features. "Excellent. It starts at 7 at the town hall. Nothing fancy, but folks look forward to it." "I'll be ready," she promised. After he departed, Betsy could barely contain herself. "A spring social with the handsomest rancher in the county." She clasped her hands dramatically. "What will you wear?" The question deflated Felicity's momentary elation. "I'm afraid I don't have anything suitable. My trunks contained only practical clothing for working in the store." "We'll make something," Betsy declared confidently. "There's lovely fabric right here in the store, and I know Mrs. Wilson would help with the sewing. She was a dressmaker in St. Louis before she married the sheriff." And so, in the evenings after closing the store, Felicity found herself working on a new dress, a soft green cotton with a modest bustle and lace trim. Mrs. Wilson proved to be an excellent seamstress, offering guidance while letting Felicity do much of the work herself. "Kieran Nicholson's a good catch," Mrs. Wilson remarked casually as they worked. His ranch is one of the most prosperous in these parts, and he's known to be fair in his dealings. It's only a dance, Felicity reminded her, threading a needle. Not a marriage proposal. Mrs. Wilson smiled knowingly. Of course, but a dance can be the start of something, can't it? By Saturday, the dress was complete, and Felicity couldn't deny a flutter of anticipation as she prepared for the evening. Betsy helped arrange her hair, incorporating small white flowers from Mrs. Holloway's garden. "You look beautiful," Betsy declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Mr. Nicholson won't know what hit him. Precisely at 7, a knock at the store's door announced his arrival. Felicity descended the stairs, conscious of his gaze as she appeared. He was dressed in what was clearly his best attire, a dark suit with a crisp white shirt and string tie, his normally tousled hair combed neatly. "Miss Turner," he said softly, "you look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, accepting the compliment with a small curtsy. "You're quite handsome yourself, Mr. Nicholson." He offered his arm, and they stepped out into the evening. The spring air carried the scent of prairie wildflowers, and lanterns illuminated the path to the town hall. Other couples and families were making their way there as well, creating a festive atmosphere. "I should warn you," Kieran said as they walked, "these socials aren't nearly as refined as what you might be used to in Boston." "I'm not expecting a symphony orchestra," she assured him with a smile. "Just good company." The town hall had been transformed with bunting and flowers. A small band played lively tunes on a raised platform, while tables along one wall held platters of food contributed by townspeople. Children darted between the adults, playing games in one corner while their parents socialized. Kieran introduced Felicity to numerous people, many of whom she recognized from the store but hadn't properly met. She was struck by the warmth of their welcome, even from those who initially regarded her with curiosity. "Miss Turner, how delightful to see you here," Mrs. Peterson approached, her husband the banker in tow. "And with Mr. Nicholson, no less. You're causing quite a stir, my dear." "I'm just enjoying the festivities," Felicity replied diplomatically. Of course, but it's so nice to see Kieran at a social event. He usually avoids them like the plague." She patted his arm affectionately. "Too busy with those cattle of his. Someone has to mind the ranch, Mrs. Peterson," he replied good-naturedly. After more such exchanges, the band struck up a waltz, and Kieran turned to Felicity. "Would you care to dance, Miss Turner?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Nicholson," she replied, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor. His hand settled respectfully at her waist, while the other clasped hers gently. As they began to move with the music, Felicity noted with pleasure that he was an accomplished dancer, guiding her smoothly through the steps. "You surprise me, Mr. Nicholson," she admitted. "I wouldn't have expected a rancher to waltz so well." A smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted, said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a bull in a china shop." "She taught you well." "She did. She was from Philadelphia originally. Came west with my father after they married." His expression grew momentarily distant. "She passed 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Felicity said softly. "I lost both my parents last year, typhoid." "It's hard," he acknowledged, his arm tightening slightly around her waist, not improper, but comforting. "Does it get easier?" "Different, not easier," she replied honestly. "Some days I can barely remember what they looked like. Others, I hear my father's laugh so clearly it's as if he's in the next room." The music flowed around them as they continued to dance, conversation giving way to a comfortable silence. Felicity found herself increasingly aware of his physical presence, the subtle scent of soap and leather, the strength in his hand at her waist, the warmth in his blue eyes when they met hers. When the waltz ended, he reluctantly released her. Would you like some refreshments? Yes, please. He guided her to the refreshment table and procured glasses of punch for them both. They were soon joined by others eager to speak with Felicity about the store, or to draw Kieran into discussions about cattle prices and weather predictions. As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, conversing with increasing ease. Felicity found herself laughing at his dry observations about local personalities, while he listened attentively to her stories of Boston life. "It sounds very civilized," he remarked after she described the symphony performances she had attended with her parents. "It was," she agreed, "but somewhat confining too. Women of my station were expected to follow very particular paths. And what path did you envision for yourself?" The question gave her pause. "I'm not sure I ever truly decided. My father wanted me to marry the son of his business partner, a suitable match," he said. "But then my parents fell ill, the business faltered, and suddenly I was writing to Cousin Thomas about coming west." She looked around the simple town hall with its paper decorations and enthusiastic but unpolished musicians. "It's certainly not what I imagined, but I'm finding it has its own appeal." "Dodge City grows on you," Kieran agreed, "though I admit it's still rough around the edges. What about you?" She asked. "Did you always know you'd be a rancher?" "Pretty much. The land gets in your blood. During the worst droughts or when blizzards threaten the herd, I sometimes wonder why I persist. But then spring comes, new calves are born, and I remember." His gaze turned thoughtful. "There's something about building something lasting, about working with the land rather than against it." The evening drew to a close with a final Virginia reel that left everyone breathless and laughing. As couples and families began to depart, Kieran offered Felicity his arm once more. "May I walk you home, Miss Turner?" The streets of Dodge were quieter now, with only the saloon still brightly lit and noisy. Kieran kept her on the opposite side of the street from these establishments, though Felicity caught curious glances from patrons lounging on boardwalks. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," she said as they approached the store. "I enjoyed myself more than I expected to. I'm glad." He hesitated at the foot of the stairs leading to her door. "Miss Turner, Felicity, I've been thinking." The use of her given name sent a small thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Nicholson, Kieran, please." He removed his hat, holding it almost nervously. "I'd like to call on you properly. Sunday dinners, maybe an occasional ride when you can get away from the store." In the lamplight, his expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. Felicity felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the spring evening. "I'd like that very much, Kieran," she replied softly. Relief and pleasure crossed his features. "Good, that's good," he cleared his throat. "Would tomorrow be too soon? For dinner, I mean." "After church services. Not too soon at all. Betsy and I attend the 9 o'clock service. I'll meet you there then." He hesitated, then raised her hand to his lips for a brief, proper kiss. "Good night, Felicity." "Good night, Kieran." As she watched him walk away, Felicity felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. The future, which had seemed so bleak just days before, now held promise. Upstairs, she found Betsy waiting eagerly for details, which Felicity provided while they prepared for bed, though she kept the more personal moments to herself, treasuring them privately. "He's smitten with you," Betsy declared confidently. Everyone could see it. "It's much too soon for such talk," Felicity protested, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "Maybe," Betsy conceded, "but I haven't seen Kieran Nicholson look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight. Not ever." Sleep came easily to Felicity that night, her dreams filled with waltzes, and the memory of blue eyes looking at her as if she were something precious. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Felicity dressed with particular care in her best remaining dress, a navy blue with white trim that, while not fashionable by Boston standards, was dignified and appropriate for church services. She and Betsy walked the short distance to the small wooden church, where they were greeted warmly by Reverend Grant. Kieran arrived moments before the service began, slipping into the pew beside Felicity with a whispered, "Good morning." His proximity throughout the service, the brush of his sleeve against hers, the low rumble of his voice during hymns, left her absurdly conscious of his presence. After the service, they joined the congregation outside, where Reverend Grant's sermon on perseverance through hardship was being discussed. "A fine message," Mrs. Peterson observed, eyeing Kieran and Felicity with undisguised interest. "Especially relevant for newcomers to our community." "Indeed," Felicity agreed politely. "The Reverend speaks with great insight." "Miss Turner has shown remarkable perseverance already," Kieran added, a protective note in his voice that didn't escape Felicity's notice. Reopening the store so quickly after arriving under such difficult circumstances. Mrs. Peterson smiled. "Yes, quite impressive. Will you be joining us for the Ladies' Aid Society meeting tomorrow, Miss Turner? We're planning the summer festival." "I'd be delighted," Felicity replied, recognizing the overture for what it was, an invitation to integrate more fully into the community. After making their farewells to the congregation, Kieran escorted Felicity and Betsy back to the store. "I'll return at noon for dinner," he said. "Unless that's too soon." "Not at all," Felicity assured him. "We'll be ready." Once inside, Betsy immediately set about preparing the meal they had planned, a simple but hearty Sunday dinner of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread that Mrs. Holloway had sent over the previous evening. "You should wear your hair down," Betsy suggested as they worked. "Well, not down completely, that wouldn't be proper, but maybe that style with the loose curls at the back." "Betsy," Felicity exclaimed, laughing, "it's just dinner." "It's not just dinner, and you know it," the younger girl replied with a knowing look. "He's courting you. It's much too soon to say that." But even as she protested, Felicity found herself rearranging her hair as Betsy had suggested. Kieran arrived precisely at noon, bearing a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These are from the South Meadow," he said, presenting them to Felicity. "They reminded me of your dress last night." The simple gesture touched her deeply. "They're beautiful, thank you." Dinner passed pleasantly, with conversation flowing easily between the three of them. Kieran shared stories about the ranch, his efforts to improve the cattle bloodlines, his hopes for expanding the operation. Felicity spoke of her plans for the store, including ideas for new inventory that might appeal to the changing needs of the town. "Dodge is growing," Kieran observed. "The railroads brought more families, folks looking to put down roots rather than just passing through." "That's what I'm counting on," Felicity admitted. "A stable community needs reliable merchants." "And merchants need support from the community," he replied. "Speaking of which, my foreman's wife was asking if you might stock more varieties of fabric. She's quite the seamstress and finds the selection in Hayes City superior." "I'd be happy to order whatever she recommends," Felicity said eagerly. "Perhaps she could visit the store and advise me. I'll bring her next time I come to town." He hesitated. "Which reminds me of something I've been meaning to discuss. The journey between the ranch and town isn't always easy, especially with the creek running high after spring rains." "I've noticed the roads can be quite muddy," Felicity agreed, wondering where this conversation was leading. "Yes. And it occurs to me that it might be more convenient if I had a place in town, for nights when business keeps me late or weather makes travel difficult." Betsy's eyes widened slightly, but she remained diplomatically silent. "That seems sensible," Felicity said cautiously. "Mrs. Holloway's boarding house is quite comfortable. Actually, I was thinking of something more permanent. The building next to yours is vacant. It used to be the dressmaker's shop before Mrs. Allen moved to Denver to be with her daughter. You're considering buying it? Felicity asked, surprised. If the price is right, he confirmed. It would give me a base in town for ranch business, make it easier to meet with cattle buyers who come through on the train. The practical reasons he offered made sense. Yet Felicity couldn't help wondering if there were other motivations behind this sudden interest in town property. The thought that he might be establishing himself closer to her sent a flutter of pleasure through her heart. It sounds like a sound business decision, she said carefully. I think so. His gaze held hers a moment longer than necessary, and it would have other advantages as well. After dinner, Betsy discreetly busied herself with cleaning up, allowing Felicity and Kieran a measure of privacy in the small parlor. They sat a respectable distance apart, yet Felicity was acutely aware of his presence. I've been meaning to ask, he said, how are you really finding life in Dodge City, truthfully? The question, asked with genuine concern, touched her. Truthfully, it's been a significant adjustment. Boston was all I knew, and this is, she gestured vaguely, different in every way. But not unpleasantly so. It must have taken courage to come all this way alone. Not courage so much as necessity, she admitted. After my parents died, there were debts. The house had to be sold. Thomas's offer represented hope when I had few options. Kieran considered this. Yet you've embraced it. Not everyone would have reopened the store or committed to staying after finding their plans so altered. What alternative did I have? Return to Boston with no prospects and no home? She shook her head. Besides, there's something liberating about being here. In Boston, I was always Charles and Margaret Turner's daughter, expected to behave in certain ways, make appropriate matches. Here, I can be simply Felicity. And who is simply Felicity? He asked softly. The question caught her off guard. I'm still discovering that, she replied honestly. But I think she's someone stronger than I realized. His smile was warm. I think so too. Their conversation continued until the afternoon light began to fade, touching on topics from literature. They discovered a shared appreciation for Dickens, to music. Kieran confessed a fondness for folk ballads, to childhood memories. Throughout, Felicity found herself increasingly drawn to this thoughtful, articulate man who seemed so different from the rough cowboy she had initially imagined him to be. When he finally rose to leave, promising to return the following weekend, she felt a distinct sense of disappointment at his departure. Thank you for a lovely afternoon, he said, taking her hand briefly. I haven't enjoyed a Sunday so much in years. Nor have I, she admitted. You'll really come next Sunday? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, he promised, his eyes crinkling with a smile. Though I might stop by the store sooner if you wouldn't mind, to discuss that building purchase. I'd like that, Felicity replied, knowing she was agreeing to more than a business discussion. After he departed, she found Betsy watching her with a knowing smile. Not courting him, the younger girl teased. Felicity laughed, unable to maintain the pretense. Perhaps a little, she conceded. Is it that obvious? Only to anyone with eyes, Betsy replied cheerfully. But it's nice. You deserve something good after everything you've been through. That night, as Felicity prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about Kieran's question, who is simply Felicity? For so long, her identity had been defined by her role as a daughter, by the expectations of Boston society. Now, she was crafting something new: shopkeeper, independent woman, and perhaps, someday, something more to Kieran Nicholson. The thought brought a smile to her lips as she drifted into sleep. The following weeks established a pattern that gradually transformed into something like courtship. though neither Felicity nor Kieran explicitly named it as such. He visited the store regularly, ostensibly to purchase supplies for the ranch or to discuss the building next door, which he did indeed purchase and begin renovating. Word spread quickly through the small community. Felicity found herself the subject of good-natured curiosity from customers, who often lingered to chat about that nice Nicholson boy, and how he finally seems to have found a reason to come to town more often. For her part, Felicity focused on establishing the store as a successful business. She expanded the inventory based on customer requests, arranged displays more attractively, and began keeping more detailed records than even her meticulous cousin had maintained. The work was satisfying, giving her a sense of purpose and accomplishment she had never experienced in Boston. Sundays became the highlight of her week church services, followed by dinner with Kieran, often joined by Mrs. Holloway or other friends they had made. As spring progressed into early summer, these gatherings occasionally became picnics by the creek or outings to neighboring farms. It was during one such Sunday in June, as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree after a church picnic, that Kieran first kissed her. The others had wandered ahead to examine a field of wildflowers, leaving them momentarily alone. "Felicity," he said, his voice unusually serious, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." She turned to him, noting the intensity in his expression. "What is it?" He took her hand gently. "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember, being with you. It's changed things for me, changed how I see the future." Her heart quickened. "It's been the same for me," she admitted softly. "I know it's still early," he continued, "but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I care for you deeply." "And I for you," she whispered. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. Instead, she closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle but filled with promise. It lasted only moments before they separated, mindful of propriety even in their relative privacy. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he confessed, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I've wanted you to," she replied with a small smile, "though Mrs. Peterson would probably have strong opinions about such behavior." He chuckled. "Mrs. Peterson has strong opinions about everything." His expression grew serious again. "Felicity, I don't want to rush you. I know you're still establishing yourself here, finding your footing." "I appreciate that," she said. "It's all happened so quickly, coming here, inheriting the store, meeting you. Sometimes it feels like I'm living someone else's life." "Is it a life you could be happy with?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his question. She considered this thoughtfully. "Yes," she finally said. "It's not what I expected, but I find I'm happier here now than I've been in a very long time." Their moment of privacy was interrupted by the return of their companions, but the understanding between them had shifted irrevocably. Something new had begun, something both exciting and a little frightening in its potential. As summer progressed, their courtship became more openly acknowledged. Kieran called formally at the store on Wednesday evenings, sometimes taking Felicity for walks along the more respectable streets of Dodge City, or to the small restaurant that had recently opened near the railroad station. On Sundays, they were a recognized pair at church services, sitting together and joining other couples for social activities afterward. The renovations on the building next to the store were completed in late July, creating a small but comfortable apartment above a space that Kieran established as an office for ranch business. The proximity allowed for more frequent, if brief, interactions during the week, as they often took lunch together on the small balcony that connected the two buildings' upper floors. It was during one such lunch in early August that Kieran brought up the subject of a visit to the Circle and Ranch. "I'd like you to see it," he said, pouring her more lemonade, "to understand what it means to me." "I'd love to," she replied eagerly, "but the store. Betsy has been helping you manage it for months now, and Mrs. Wilson mentioned her niece is looking for work." Perhaps between them they could mind the store for a day. Felicity considered this. The store was running smoothly, and she had established regular hours and procedures that others could follow. A day trip would be possible, she agreed. "When did you have in mind?" "This Saturday," he suggested. "We'd leave early before the heat becomes too intense and return before dark." "Saturday," she repeated, smiling. "Yes, I think that would work perfectly." The day of their excursion dawned clear and promised to be hot by afternoon. Kieran arrived at the store just after sunrise, driving a light buggy rather than riding horseback as he usually did. "I thought this would be more comfortable for you," he explained as he helped her up, "though it's not as fast as riding." "It's perfect," she assured him, settling onto the seat beside him. She had dressed practically in a light cotton dress and had brought a wide-brimmed hat to protect against the sun. "I'm excited to see the ranch. You speak of it with such pride." The journey took nearly 2 hours, following the winding path of a creek for much of the way. As they traveled, Kieran pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history, both the recent settlement by people like his father and the much longer presence of the indigenous peoples who had hunted these lands for generations. "The Comanche considered this their territory," he explained. "There were conflicts in the early days. My father spoke of them with respect, though, said they understood the land in ways we're still learning." Felicity appreciated his nuanced perspective, so different from the simplistic views she'd often heard expressed in Boston drawing rooms. "And now, most were forced onto reservations," he said, a note of regret in his voice, "though some still pass through occasionally." Miguel's mother was Kiowa. He maintains connections with her people. As they crested a gentle rise, the landscape opened before them, and Felicity caught her first glimpse of the circle and ranch. A substantial 2-story house stood surrounded by cottonwood trees, with various outbuildings nearby. Beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed, and in the distance the land rose toward low hills. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "So open and free." Kieran's expression softened as he surveyed his domain. "My father chose this spot because of the year-round creek and natural shelter those hills provide in winter. He built the first house himself, just a one-room cabin. This place," he nodded toward the main house, "came later when the herd grew and he could afford better." As they approached, Felicity noticed details that spoke of care and permanence: the well-tended garden beside the house, the solid construction of the barns and corrals, the windmill that pumped water into a large tank. This was no temporary settlement but a home built to last generations. They were greeted by a tall, lean man with weathered features who Kieran introduced as Frank, his foreman of 15 years. Several ranch hands emerged from the barn, tipping their hats respectfully to Felicity while exchanging good-natured banter with their employer. "So this is the lady who's got the boss riding into town twice a week," one called with a grin. "Beginning to think he'd forgotten what a cow looks like." "Mind your manners, Pete," Kieran replied, though his tone was more amused than reproving. "Miss Turner runs the most important business in Dodge City." "After the saloon, you mean?" another hand quipped, earning laughter from his companions and a mock glare from Kieran. "Don't mind them," he told Felicity as he helped her down from the buggy. "They've been giving me grief since they realized I was calling on you regularly." "I think it's charming," she replied with a smile. "It speaks well of you that your men feel comfortable enough to tease." Kieran gave her a tour of the ranch house first, a solidly built structure with simple but quality furnishings. The parlor held a piano, which surprised her. "My mother's," he explained, noting her interest. "She taught music lessons to the neighboring ranchers' children. Said civilization required culture, even on the frontier. She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was." He ran a hand over the piano's polished surface. "She'd have liked you, I think. You remind me of her sometimes, the way you don't let difficult circumstances defeat you." The comparison touched Felicity deeply. "I wish I could have met her." "So do I," he said softly before gesturing toward the kitchen. "Come, Mrs. Espinosa will have lunch prepared soon. She's our cook, Miguel's aunt. Been with the ranch almost as long as Frank." Mrs. Espinosa proved to be a small, energetic woman who greeted Felicity warmly, while simultaneously directing two younger women in lunch preparations, and keeping up a steady stream of Spanish that made Kieran laugh. "She says I've waited too long to bring you here," he translated, looking slightly embarrassed, "and that you're much prettier than I described." Felicity felt her cheeks warm. "Please tell her thank you and that her home is lovely." After a delicious meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and berry pie, Kieran suggested showing Felicity the rest of the ranch. They walked through the barns and corrals, where he explained the operation with evident pride. Felicity listened attentively, impressed by the scale and efficiency of the enterprise. "We run about 2,000 head now," he explained. "Started with just 50 when my father first came here. Each year we've improved the bloodlines, increased the yield." "It's impressive," she said sincerely. "You've built something remarkable." "We have," he agreed. "The men are as much a part of it as I am. Many have been here for years. It's their home too." He led her to a small rise overlooking a meadow where young calves frolicked near their mothers. They sat on a fallen log, enjoying the breeze that made the summer heat bearable. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," Kieran admitted. "I come here to think, or sometimes just to remind myself why all the hard work matters." Felicity understood. "It's peaceful. You can see how everything fits together here, the animals, the land, the people caring for both." He looked at her with appreciation. "Exactly. Most folks just see cattle and money." "I see a legacy," she said. "Something built with care, meant to last." His expression grew thoughtful. "That's what I hope for, not just for myself, but for—" He hesitated. "For a family someday." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to address it directly yet both aware of its significance. "It would be a wonderful place to raise children," Felicity said softly. "Room to run, to grow, to learn about the important things in life." Kieran's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "The only thing missing is a woman's touch in the house. My mother made it a true home. Since she's been gone, it's been functional but not the same." Felicity's heart quickened at the direction their conversation was taking. "Perhaps someday the right woman will help make it a home again." His blue eyes held hers intently. "I believe she already has." Before he could say more, a shout from the direction of the barn drew their attention. Frank was waving, indicating that Kieran was needed. "I'm sorry," he apologized, helping her to her feet. "Ranch business never stops. Will you mind waiting while I see what's needed?" "Of course not. Take your time." While Kieran was occupied with what turned out to be a minor issue with a new horse, Mrs. Espinosa invited Felicity to join her in the garden, where they communicated through a combination of broken English, gestures, and the universal language of gardening. Despite the language barrier, Felicity found herself thoroughly enjoying the older woman's company and learning about the various herbs and vegetables that thrived in the ranch's soil. When Kieran returned, he found them laughing together as Mrs. Espinosa demonstrated how to tell when a tomato was perfectly ripe. "I see you two are getting along," he observed with evident pleasure. Mrs. Espinosa has been teaching me about gardening, Felicity explained. I've never had the opportunity to grow my own food before. You have good hands for plants, Mrs. Espinosa declared in accented English. Strong but gentle, like good mother. Kieran translated the rest of what the older woman said. She says you should come back when the harvest is ready. She'll teach you to preserve vegetables for winter. I'd like that very much, Felicity replied sincerely. As the afternoon began to wane, they reluctantly prepared to return to town. Mrs. Espinosa pressed a basket of fresh eggs and vegetables into Felicity's hands, waving away her thanks with affectionate pats on her arm. The ranch hands gathered to bid them farewell, their teasing now including Felicity as well. Don't let her get away, boss, one called. She's too good for you, but keep her anyway. Ignore them, Kieran advised as he helped her into the buggy, though his smile suggested he took no offense at their ribbing. The journey back to town was quieter, both of them reflecting on the day's experiences. As they approached Dodge City with the sun beginning to set behind them, Kieran spoke. Thank you for coming today. It meant a lot to show you the ranch. Thank you for inviting me, she replied. It helped me understand you better, seeing where you belong. He glanced at her. Is that how it seemed? That I belong there? Yes, it's clearly where your heart is. His expression grew serious. Part of my heart, certainly, but lately I've found that my heart has room for more than just the ranch. The buggy rattled over a rough patch in the road, giving Felicity a moment to compose herself before responding. I'm beginning to understand that feeling. The store has become important to me, a place where I belong, but it's not the only thing that matters. They reached the back entrance to the store just as dusk was settling over Dodge City. Kieran secured the horse and helped Felicity down, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. Would it be too forward to ask if I might call on you tomorrow evening? He asked. Even though it's not our usual Wednesday, she smiled up at him. Not too forward at all. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He walked her to the door where they paused. Felicity, he began, his voice low and serious, today confirmed something I've been feeling for weeks now. I care for you deeply, more than I thought possible. And I for you, she whispered, her heart pounding. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. Instead, she rose slightly on her toes to meet him. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that surprised them both. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, while her hands found their way to his shoulders. When they finally separated, both were breathing more rapidly than before. Kieran rested his forehead against hers for a moment. I should go, he said reluctantly, before I forget myself entirely. Tomorrow evening, she reminded him, equally reluctant to end their time together. Tomorrow, he confirmed. Sleep well, Felicity. She watched him go, touching her fingers to lips that still tingled from his kiss. Whatever her expectations had been when she first arrived in Dodge City, this growing love had not been among them. Yet now she could hardly imagine her life without Kieran Nicholson in it. Inside, she found Betsy waiting eagerly for details of the day's excursion. Felicity shared the highlights: the beautiful ranch, the welcoming staff, the delicious food, but kept the more personal moments to herself, treasuring them privately. That night, as she prepared for bed, Felicity found herself contemplating a future quite different from anything she had envisioned in Boston. The store provided independence and purpose, but her feelings for Kieran opened possibilities that both excited and frightened her. Marriage had always been an expected part of her future, but in Boston, it would have been a practical arrangement, a joining of compatible families. What she felt for Kieran was something else entirely, a connection that ran deeper than practicality or compatibility. The following evening, Kieran arrived promptly at 7, bearing a small package wrapped in brown paper. They sat in the parlor, with Betsy discreetly occupying herself in the kitchen to provide a semblance of chaperoning while allowing them privacy. "I brought you something," Kieran said, presenting the package to Felicity. "It's not much, but when I saw it, I thought of you." Intrigued, she unwrapped the paper to find a small, leather-bound journal with her initials, FT, embossed in gold on the cover. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the soft leather. "But how did you arrange this so quickly? We only returned from the ranch yesterday." He looked slightly embarrassed. "Actually, I ordered it weeks ago from a craftsman in Kansas City. It arrived while you were closing the store yesterday. I thought, well, you mentioned once that you used to keep a journal in Boston. I thought you might want to continue the practice here." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. "You remembered that. I mentioned it only in passing." "I remember everything you tell me," he admitted. "Is that very strange?" "No," she said softly. "It's wonderful." Their conversation flowed easily, as it always did, touching on topics from the day's business at the store to books they had recently read. Throughout, Felicity was aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere between them, a sense of anticipation, as if they were approaching some significant threshold. As the evening grew later, Kieran moved from his chair to join Felicity on the small sofa. Taking her hand in his, he spoke with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Felicity, there's something I need to ask you, something I've been considering for some time now." Her heart quickened. "Yes," he met her gaze directly. "I know we haven't known each other long, just a few months. In some ways, that seems too brief for what I'm about to ask. But in others, it feels as if I've known you all my life." "I feel the same," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. "The ranch you saw yesterday, it's a good place, but it's not complete. It needs someone to make it truly a home again, and He took a deep breath. "I need someone to share my life with, someone who understands what matters to me, who sees the value in what I'm trying to build." Felicity could scarcely breathe as he continued. "I love you, Felicity Turner. I think I began loving you that first evening at the train station, when you were brave enough to trust a stranger in your moment of need." He slipped from the sofa to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Felicity's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Kieran, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a modest diamond set in gold, simple but elegant. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "My father gave it to me before he passed, said to save it for a woman worthy of it." "It's perfect," she whispered, admiring how it caught the lamplight. "Are you certain? About me, I mean. I'm not from your world, I know nothing about ranching, about the life you lead." "I've never been more certain of anything," he assured her, rising to sit beside her once more. "You're intelligent, adaptable, compassionate, all the qualities that matter. The rest can be learned." He cupped her cheek gently. "Besides, I'm not asking you to abandon your store. I know how important it is to you. We'll find a way to make both work." This consideration that he understood her need for the independence and purpose the store provided confirmed what she already knew, that Kieran Nicholson was a remarkable man, unlike any she had known in Boston. "I love you," she said, the words feeling both momentous and natural. "More than I thought possible when I arrived here." His kiss was tender, filled with promise and restrained passion. When they separated, he kept her close, his arm around her shoulders. "When shall we be married? I don't want a long engagement." "Nor do I," she agreed. "But we should do things properly. Perhaps 6 weeks. That would allow time for announcements and preparations without undue delay. 6 weeks, he repeated. Mid-September, then. The weather should be perfect, not too hot, before the autumn rains. They spent the next hour discussing practical details where they would live, primarily at the ranch, though they would maintain the town apartment for when Felicity needed to be at the store. Who would perform the ceremony? Reverend Grant, naturally. Who would be invited? The entire town, it seemed, plus ranching neighbors from miles around. When Kieran finally departed after several prolonged goodbyes at the door, Felicity found Betsy waiting, barely containing her excitement. "Well," the younger girl demanded, "did he ask you?" Wordlessly, Felicity extended her hand to display the ring. Betsy squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Felicity in an enthusiastic embrace. "I knew it. Oh, it's so romantic. When will the wedding be? Can I help with your dress? Will you live at the ranch? What about the store?" Laughing, Felicity disentangled herself. "Yes to all your questions, especially about helping with the dress, and we'll have the wedding in 6 weeks, mid-September." "That's so soon," Betsy exclaimed. "There's so much to plan." "I don't want anything elaborate," Felicity assured her. "Something simple but meaningful." But as news of their engagement spread through Dodge City the following day, it became clear that simple might not be possible. The women of the town, led by Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Wilson, descended upon the store with congratulations and offers of assistance that were impossible to refuse. "The Nicholson wedding will be the social event of the year," Mrs. Peterson declared. "We must do it properly." "Really, it's very kind, but we're hoping for something modest," Felicity attempted. Mrs. Wilson patted her hand. "Of course, dear, but modest doesn't mean it can't be special. The Ladies' Aid Society is already planning the refreshments for the reception." Kieran, when he visited that evening, found Felicity slightly overwhelmed by the community's response. "I had no idea our engagement would cause such excitement," she admitted. "Mrs. Peterson is talking about ordering special decorations from Kansas City," he laughed, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "The last big wedding in Dodge was 3 years ago. You can't blame them for being enthusiastic." His expression grew more serious. "Does it bother you?" "We could always elope if you prefer." "No," she said quickly. "I want to be married here with the community present. It's just, in Boston, weddings were elaborate affairs that took months to plan. I'm not sure how to navigate all these well-meaning offers." "Accept what feels right, decline the rest," he advised. "Everyone will understand. And remember, at the end of the day, what matters is that we'll be husband and wife. The rest is just details." His pragmatic perspective helped ground her, and over the following weeks, wedding preparations proceeded with relatively little stress. Felicity found herself genuinely touched by the community's investment in their happiness. Mrs. Wilson and 2 other women helped her create a wedding dress from fine fabric, ordered specially from Kansas City, a cream-colored silk with delicate lace trim that managed to be both elegant and appropriate for a frontier celebration. Kieran, meanwhile, focused on preparing the ranch house for his bride. He hired carpenters to expand the master bedroom and add a private sitting room where Felicity could maintain her own space. Mrs. Espinosa supervised a thorough cleaning and refurbishing of rooms that had been neglected since his mother's passing. 6 weeks after Kieran's proposal, on a perfect September Saturday with clear skies and gentle breezes, Felicity stood in the back room of the church, her wedding dress rustling softly as Mrs. Holloway adjusted her veil. "You look beautiful, my dear," the older woman said, blinking back tears. "Absolutely radiant." Betsy, serving as maid of honor in a pretty blue dress, was more effusive. "Wait until Kieran sees you. He won't be able to speak," Felicity smiled, surprisingly calm despite the significance of the day. "Is everyone here? The church is full to bursting, Mrs. Holloway confirmed. "Half the county has turned out, it seems." A knock at the door announced Sheriff Wilson, who had agreed to escort Felicity down the aisle in the absence of her father. "It's time, Miss Turner," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to become Mrs. Nicholson?" "More than ready," she replied with certainty. The church doors opened, and the assembled guests rose as Felicity appeared. The simple wooden building had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, but Felicity barely noticed the decorations. Her attention was fixed on the man waiting at the altar, Kieran, in a new black suit, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration as he watched her approach. Reverend Grant conducted the ceremony with dignity and warmth, speaking of the sacred bonds of matrimony and the particular challenges and joys of building a life together on the frontier. When it came time for their vows, Kieran's strong voice carried clearly through the church as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Felicity for all the days of his life. When her turn came, Felicity spoke with equal clarity and conviction. "I, Felicity Turner, take you, Kieran Nicholson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love and cherish you, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, and to build a home and family with you for as long as we both shall live." The exchange of rings, her mother's simple gold band joining her mother-in-law's diamond on Felicity's finger, while Kieran received a plain gold band that had been his father's, sealed their union. Reverend Grant's pronouncement that they were now husband and wife was met with enthusiastic applause from the congregation. Kieran's kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their public setting yet conveying his private joy. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Nicholson, Felicity felt a sense of rightness, of belonging that transcended the formality of the ceremony. The reception, held in the town hall, was a jubilant affair. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by nearly every household in Dodge City: roasted meats, fresh bread, pies, and cakes of every description. The small band that had played at the spring social provided music for dancing, and the celebration continued well into the evening. As the sun began to set, Kieran found Felicity in conversation with Mrs. Wilson and drew her aside. "The buggy's ready whenever you are, Mrs. Nicholson," he said, his voice warm on her new name. "Unless you'd prefer to stay longer." "No," she replied softly. "I'm ready to go home." They made their farewells amid good-natured teasing and sincere well-wishes. Betsy embraced Felicity tightly, whispering, "I'll take good care of the store, I promise. Don't worry about anything." The journey to the ranch was different from any they had taken before, no longer merely a visit, but a homecoming. They traveled mostly in comfortable silence, occasionally commenting on moments from the wedding or expressions of particular guests. Beneath the conversation lay a current of anticipation for the privacy that awaited them. As they approached the ranch, Felicity noted with surprise that the house was illuminated with lanterns along the porch and in the windows, creating a welcoming glow in the gathering darkness. "Mrs. Espinosa's doing," Kieran explained. "She wanted everything to be perfect for your arrival." The ranch hands had discreetly made themselves scarce, though a light burned in the bunkhouse, suggesting they were celebrating in their own fashion. Only Frank and Mrs. Espinosa awaited the newlyweds, offering brief congratulations before tactfully withdrawing to their own quarters. Alone at last, Kieran led Felicity upstairs to the bedroom that would now be theirs. The room had been transformed since her previous visit. New curtains hung at the windows, a colorful quilt adorned the large bed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a vase on the dressing table. "Mrs. Espinosa again," Felicity asked, touched by the thoughtful preparations. And some of the neighboring women, Kieran confirmed. They wanted to welcome you properly. He hesitated, suddenly seeming almost shy. Are you happy, Felicity? Truly. This is all so different from the life you knew. She moved to him, placing her hands on his chest and looking up into his eyes. I have never been happier, she assured him with complete honesty. This life, our life, is more than I ever dreamed possible. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. I'll spend every day trying to ensure you never regret your decision, he promised. There's nothing to regret, she whispered, rising on tiptoes to press her lips to his. Only a future to embrace. Their kiss deepened, no longer constrained by propriety or the presence of others. As husband and wife, they were free to express the passion that had been building between them for months. Kieran's hands moved reverently over the silk of her wedding dress, while Felicity explored the solid warmth of his shoulders beneath his suit jacket. With gentle confidence, he guided her toward the bed that would be theirs from this night forward. The lamplight cast a golden glow over the room as they discovered one another fully for the first time, their union as natural and right as the joining of their lives had been. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the colorful quilt, Kieran's fingers traced lazy patterns along Felicity's bare shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. She smiled in the darkness. "I was remembering that first night in Dodge City. How lost I felt, how afraid. And then you appeared, offering help when I needed it most." She was crying because no one came for her, he quoted softly. "I'm here now, that's what matters." "You had no obligation to help me," she mused, "yet you did without hesitation." He pulled her closer. "Something about you called to me from the first moment. I couldn't have walked away if I'd tried." "I'm glad you didn't," she whispered, nestling against his chest. "Though I never imagined that moment would lead to this." "Nor did I," he admitted. "But I've learned that life's best gifts often come unexpectedly." Felicity thought of all the unexpected turns her life had taken: the loss of her parents, the journey west, her cousin's death, and now this marriage to a man so different from anyone she had known in Boston, yet so perfectly suited to her in ways she was still discovering. "I love you, Kieran Nicholson," she said, the words feeling both momentous and entirely natural. His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Felicity Nicholson, more than I have words to express." As they drifted toward sleep, husband and wife in truth as well as name, Felicity felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. That was what mattered most. The following months brought adjustments as Felicity and Kieran established their life together. They settled into a routine that accommodated both the ranch's demands and Felicity's continued involvement with the store. 3 days a week, she traveled to town to oversee operations and handle ordering, with Betsy managing things in her absence. The other days, she immersed herself in learning ranch operations, developing a genuine interest in the business that was her husband's passion. Winter arrived with bitter cold and occasional blizzards that made travel between the ranch and town impossible for days at a time. During these periods, they retreated into the cozy warmth of the ranch house, reading aloud by the fire, playing chess, or simply talking late into the night. Kieran taught Felicity to play the piano his mother had loved, while she introduced him to the poetry and literature she had grown up with in Boston. By spring, their happiness was enhanced by the news that Felicity was expecting their first child, due in late autumn. The announcement was met with joy throughout the community, with Mrs. Espinoza immediately beginning to knit tiny garments, and Mrs. Peterson organizing a gathering where the women of Dodge City presented Felicity with handmade items for the baby. Kieran's response to the news had been everything Felicity could have hoped for: tender concern for her well-being mixed with undisguised delight at the prospect of fatherhood. "A child," he had whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat abdomen. "Our child. It hardly seems real." "Very real," she assured him with a smile, "and becoming more so every day." As her pregnancy progressed, Felicity gradually reduced her time at the store, confident in Betsy's growing competence. By late summer, with her condition increasingly evident, she limited her trips to town to once a week, focusing instead on preparing the ranch house for the baby's arrival. One evening in early September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Felicity felt the baby move decisively. Taking Kieran's hand, she placed it where their child was making its presence known. "Strong," he observed with wonder as he felt the movement beneath his palm. "Like his mother, or her father," Felicity countered with a smile. "Do you have a preference, boy or girl?" He considered this thoughtfully. "Healthy is all that matters, though I admit there's something appealing about a daughter with your auburn hair and spirit. And if it's a boy, then I'll teach him everything my father taught me about ranching, about responsibility, about treating people fairly." His expression grew tender. "And you'll teach him about books and music and the wider world beyond these plains." Felicity leaned against his shoulder, content. "Either way, our child will have the best of both worlds, your frontier strength and my eastern refinement." "A perfect combination," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Their son arrived on a crisp November morning after a night of labor that tested Felicity's endurance, but ultimately rewarded her with the indescribable joy of holding her child for the first time. James Thomas Nicholson, named for both their fathers, had Kieran's blue eyes and a dusting of what promised to become Felicity's auburn hair. "He's perfect," Kieran whispered, perched carefully on the edge of the bed as he studied his son's tiny features. "Absolutely perfect." "He is," Felicity agreed, exhausted but radiant. "And he's ours." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys as they built their life together. The ranch prospered under Kieran's management, expanding its operations to include breeding horses as well as cattle. Felicity continued her involvement with the store, though at a reduced capacity, finding satisfaction in maintaining her independence while prioritizing her family. Jamie, to his parents, grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's affinity for outdoor life and his mother's love of books. When he was 3, a sister joined the family, Catherine Margaret, called Kate, who from her earliest days showed a determined spirit that amused and occasionally exasperated her parents. 5 years into their marriage, as they celebrated Jamie's 4th birthday with a small gathering at the ranch, Kieran found Felicity standing alone on the porch, watching their son play with the children of neighboring ranchers. "Happy?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "I was just thinking about how different my life might have been if Thomas had met me at the train station that day." "Do you ever regret it? The path not taken?" She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Never. Whatever I might have had in Boston or with Thomas, it couldn't compare to this, to you, to our children, to the life we've built together." He touched her cheek gently. "When I found you crying at that station, I had no idea I was meeting my future wife, the mother of my children. I just knew you needed help." "She was crying because no one came for her," Felicity recalled softly. "The cowboy said, 'I'm here now, that's what matters.'" "And it did matter," Kieran agreed, drawing her closer. "It changed everything." "For the better," she whispered against his lips before he kissed her with the familiar tenderness that still had the power to quicken her pulse. Their moment was interrupted by Jamie's excited voice. "Papa! Mama! Look what I can do!" They turned to watch their son attempt to stand on his head, resulting in an ungraceful tumble that nevertheless earned applause from his proud parents. As evening fell and their guests departed, leaving the family to their quiet routines, Felicity found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this place, this life, this love. From the desolation of that first night in Dodge City to the fulfillment of the present, every step had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Later, as she and Kieran tucked their children into bed, with Jamie insisting on just one more story and Kate already asleep with her thumb firmly in her mouth, Felicity felt the familiar wave of gratitude that had become part of her daily existence. This was her family, her home, her happiness found in the most unexpected place, with a man who had once been a stranger but who now knew her better than anyone ever had. The journey from Boston had been long, the path not always smooth, but the destination had proven worth every hardship along the way. As they retired to their own room, Kieran drew her into his arms with the comfortable familiarity of long-established love. "I was thinking," he said, "about expanding the east pasture next spring. It would mean taking on a few more hands, but the additional grazing would support a larger herd." "That sounds sensible," Felicity replied, recognizing the signs of his planning mind at work. "And the store's doing well enough that we could invest some of the profits back into the ranch." He smiled, still pleasantly surprised even after years of marriage by her business acumen. "That's what I was thinking, a true partnership in every sense." "Always," she promised, returning his smile. "In this and everything." As they settled into bed, with the peaceful sounds of the sleeping ranch surrounding them, Felicity thought again of that tearful young woman at the Dodge City train station and the cowboy who had stopped to offer assistance. How strange and wonderful that moment of despair had led to this lifetime of joy. "Kieran," she murmured, already half asleep in the circle of his arms. Thank you for being there that night, for seeing someone who needed help and not walking away." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Best decision I ever made," he replied softly. "Every day with you confirms it." And as they drifted into sleep, husband and wife, parents to two beautiful children, partners in building something lasting on the Kansas prairie, Felicity knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. Not in the drawing rooms of Boston or even behind the counter of a frontier store, but here in this home, in this life, in this love that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a spring evening long ago.